Hey there, Marvel fans! Have you heard the latest buzz? The Sinister Six is making a comeback, and it's going to be epic. Imagine Spider-Man facing off against his toughest enemies from multiple universes. Yep, the multiverse is bringing together villains from the old Spider-Man movies and the new ones. Remember the first time the Sinister Six teamed up in the Amazing Spider-Man Annual #1? Well, get ready for an even crazier ride with familiar faces like Dr. Octopus, Electro, and possibly even the Green Goblin. Stick around to find out how the Sinister Six's return will shake up both the Sony Pictures universe of Marvel characters and the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Trust me, you don't want to miss this. The Sinister Six first appeared in a comic book called The Amazing Spider-Man Annual #1 way back in 1964. This issue was a big deal because it brought together some of Spider-Man's biggest foes in one epic story. The guy who came up with the idea was Stan Lee, the legendary co-creator of Spider-Man, along with artist Steve Ditko. They thought it would be interesting to see what would happen if a bunch of villains who usually worked alone decided to join forces against their common enemy, Spider-Man. So, who are these villains? The original lineup of the Sinister Six included Dr. Octopus, Electro, the Vulture, Mysterio, Kraven the Hunter, and Sandman. Each of these guys is pretty dangerous on their own, but together, they're a real nightmare for Spider-Man. Dr. Octopus, also known as Doc Ock, is kind of the ringleader of the group. He's the brains behind the Sinister Six. Doc Ock is a brilliant scientist who ended up with mechanical tentacles attached to his body after an experiment gone wrong. These tentacles give him super strength and agility, making him a tough opponent for Spider-Man. The thing is, Doc Ock kept getting beaten by Spider-Man, and it really got under his skin. So, he decided to form an alliance with other villains who had their own grudges against Spider-Man. He figured that together they might finally be able to take down the Web Slinger. Next we have Electro. This guy can control electricity, which makes him incredibly powerful. He can shoot lightning bolts from his hands and even travel through electrical currents. Imagine trying to fight someone who can zap you from a distance and move super fast. That's Electro for you. He's always been one of Spider-Man's toughest enemies because of his raw power and unpredictability. Then there's the Vulture. The Vulture is an older man named Adrian Toomes who invented a special suit that allows him to fly. The suit also gives him enhanced strength. Despite his age, he's a formidable opponent in the sky. He's motivated by a deep-seated bitterness and desire for revenge, which makes him a perfect fit for the Sinister Six. Mysterio is another fascinating member. His real name is Quentin Beck, and he used to be a special effects artist and master illusionist. Mysterio doesn't have superpowers in the traditional sense, but he's incredibly skilled at creating realistic illusions and using technology to trick his enemies. He loves to mess with Spider-Man's mind, making him see and hear things that aren't really there. Fighting Mysterio is like being in a constant state of confusion. Kraven the Hunter is a big game hunter who sees Spider-Man as the ultimate prey. He's super strong, agile, and has an array of hunting skills and tools at his disposal. Kraven is all about proving his superiority, and what better way to do that than by capturing or defeating Spider-Man? He's always looking for a challenge, and Spider-Man represents the greatest challenge of all. Lastly, we have Sandman. This guy can turn his body into sand, which makes him nearly impossible to hurt. He can slip through tiny spaces, create massive sand structures, and even turn parts of his body into rock-hard weapons. Sandman's powers make him incredibly versatile and dangerous in a fight. So when Dr. Octopus brought these villains together, it was a big deal. Each member had their own unique abilities and reasons for wanting to take down Spider-Man. Doc Ock's idea was that if they all worked together, they'd have a much better chance of defeating Spider-Man once and for all. And honestly, it made sense. Spider-Man could handle them one-on-one, but fighting all six at once? That's a whole different story. Alfred Molina is coming back as Dr. Octopus in the Marvel Cinematic Universe movie Spider-Man No Way Home. This has got to be one of the most talked about returns in the MCU, and for good reason. Alfred Molina first played Dr. Octopus, or Doc Ock, in Spider-Man 2, which came out in 2004. His performance was absolutely iconic. Molina managed to bring a lot of depth to the character, making Doc Ock not just a villain, but someone you could actually feel for. Remember how he started off as this brilliant scientist named Otto Octavius? He was working on a revolutionary energy project when things went horribly wrong. The mechanical tentacles he was using fused to his body, and his life took a dark turn. Those tentacles had artificial intelligence, and they started influencing his mind, pushing him towards evil actions. What made Molina's portrayal so memorable was the tragic backstory and the character's development throughout the movie. Otto Octavius wasn't a bad guy from the start. He was a passionate scientist who wanted to make the world a better place. But after the accident, he lost his wife, and the malfunctioning tentacles drove him to madness. He became obsessed with completing his experiment, no matter the cost. Despite all the chaos he caused, you could see the conflict within him, especially towards the end of the movie. In Spider-Man 2, we got to see a different side of Dr. Octopus when he ultimately sacrifices himself to save the city. He realizes the harm his creation could cause and decides to drown it in the river, taking himself along with it. That moment was both heroic and tragic, making Doc Ock one of the most complex villains in superhero movies. Now, with Alfred Molina returning as Dr. Octopus in Spider-Man No Way Home, fans are super excited. His return brings a wave of nostalgia for those who love Spider-Man 2, but it also raises a lot of intriguing possibilities for the story. How will Doc Ock fit into the new Spider-Man's world? And what does this mean for the Sinister Six? Spider-Man No Way Home is diving into the multiverse concept, which means we might see characters from different dimensions and timelines. This opens the door for all sorts of interesting twists. Maybe Dr. Octopus from the Raimi universe ends up in the MCU, bringing his knowledge and experience with him. This could lead to the formation of a new version of the Sinister Six, a supervillain team that Doc Ock originally created in the comics. Molina's return also makes us wonder about his character's arc in the new movie. Will he still be the conflicted, tragic figure we saw in Spider-Man 2? Or will he have embraced his darker side completely? And how will Spider-Man deal with a villain who has such a personal connection to his own struggles and growth as a hero? If you've been keeping up with the MCU, you know that the concept of the multiverse was introduced in the series Loki. This idea is super exciting because it means there are multiple versions of characters and events happening in different dimensions or timelines. It's like there are endless possibilities, and that's where things get really interesting for the Sinister Six. In Loki, we learn that there are different timelines and realities, each with its own versions of familiar characters. This concept is key to understanding how the Sinister Six could return in a big way. Since we're dealing with the multiverse, characters from older Spider-Man movies and even new versions from different dimensions can come together in the MCU. In short, the return of the Sinister Six is set to shake things up in a big way. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to give it a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button for more Marvel updates and theories. Let us know in the comments which villain you're most excited to see and what you think will happen in the next Spider-Man saga.